Cooper Wechkin. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well, Lauren. Thank you for having me.
So, Cooper and I have I am a client of Cooper's, but we have never met. Cooper Wechkin is the CEO and founder of RyeStrategy, which is a ESG. What is ESG for folks that don't know? Environmental
Yeah,
sustainability.
it's
You tell
environmental,
me.
social, and governance, and we'll maybe we'll get into it today. Maybe we won't. It's also that whatever the term is seems to change every X number of years, and we might be on our way into whatever's coming next in the near future here. But it's
Yes. So
all focused around.
Cooper's firm is Keenan Reed Strategies, ESG consulting firm. Yes, we, as small and mighty as we are, do measure our environmental impact. I didn't know that was a thing until it was put in my lap. And since then, I have learned a lot about it. I think it's got a lot of benefits for people. Cooper is also one of several ESG focused consultants that I have met over the last year and a half. So it's a growing niche, and there are many types of roles in this niche. And so I thought it would be good to invite you onto the podcast and talk about what it is that you do and why you do it, and how other consultants might do it. Many of our listeners are consultants who practice independently, or they're fractional executives, or they are people pondering those types of careers. And so I think it's really good to have a niche. And this is one that I think there's a lot of interest around and one I think people should learn about. So
Yeah,
thanks for joining me.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So let's go back. Um, I didn't, like I said, I had never heard of the term ESG until about 2 years ago, but it is not new. It was just new to me. What was the path that led you into this line of work?
Yeah. Do we want to go like the full
Sure, wherever
nine
you want to
yards
start.
here? Dig right in. Yeah. So I like to be upfront about this. I started the company when I was an undergrad student at the University of Washington. So I think we started. It's crazy. We just turned five actually the week before last, officially on paper. I think we incorporated the week that COVID hit, essentially in the U.S., which was a very very interesting time. So I feel like we've been having fun from the start. Is maybe one way to put it. But for myself, I was born and raised out in Seattle, Washington, over on the West Coast. Had always kind of been interested, I think, on the one hand, sort of in career and business and profit and everything that comes with that. I grew up with some family members or kind of close family friends who some of them had never even gone to college, but had started companies in these really kind of little niche areas and had done well and just had been really interested in that. And so that was kind of one side. And then the other side was, interested in impact. But I think for myself, for a long time, I sort of saw those as two, I'd say almost like separate pursuits. There was having a career, whatever that looked like, and success, however I wanted to define it. And then there was impact. And that was more of my personal life and what I did on the side. So I went through the business school program at the University of Washington. Again, and I always had that interest. Got really lucky with some different opportunities. I got to work pretty early on in private equity in the legal cannabis space. And so I got to be at this fund that essentially went from kind of being nobodies for about the first 2 months that I was there to then they actually IPO'd the first publicly traded cannabis company onto the NASDAQ in the US. And this was back, I think, I want to say it's like 2018, 2019 range. And they went through kind of this crazy journey where they went from like the IPO at around $17 a share. They peaked at 300 and now it is, trades around $4 the last time I checked. And I think they're trying to get into organic fruits and vegetable growing and, diversifying the business a bit. But I
Can
kind of
I
got to
can I
be
pause
there.
you there?
Yeah,
What was the name of the
it was
company?
Tilray was the company. So I worked at the holding company that was kind of behind them.
I want to say I bought into the IPO in the first hour, and
Really?
yeah, this is the worst story. So and I was this is the worst, and not related to anything ESG, but let's just pause. I either
Yeah.
was Tilray or the one that came right after it. I bought
Yeah.
in, like I said, within the first hour. I was waiting
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
I was at Microsoft, who
Yeah.
this is how we got connected, but I was at
Yeah.
Microsoft at an offsite, And I stepped
Yeah.
out during a break and bought like $25,000. And when I left on the afternoon break, I had made like an ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I did not sell it. And then
Oh, oh no.
I got back to the hotel room that night thinking like,
Yeah.
I'm going to retire. I'm such hot shit.
Yeah.
And it
We're
was back to
ready.
25 and I was like, sell. So I didn't lose any money, but like for a minute
Yeah.
there, I was a paper cajillionaire
Uh,
on early stage. Yeah, in those hot cannabis IPO
I
days.
love that. That's
And
so
I'm not a
funny.
cannabis user at all.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just like am a borderline day trader. So
Well,
that's how that went down.
yeah. I mean, the funniest thing, and this is getting us off topic, but I mean, I think
That's
it's
fine.
fascinating. The people who ran the fund were Yale MBAs, like that wasn't their day to day. They saw a business opportunity. And so it was always a very interesting mishmash of individuals there. I loved it. I thought it was such an interesting experience. I got to, like actually do market research for them, helped with some of their other, series, whatever fundraisers, and got to be plugged in, 18, 19 years old, and thought it was fascinating. That went through its journey, and kind of right as it was starting to come down off the peak, that kind of came to an end. It was an internship at that point. I was the intern making minimum wage. Unfortunately, did not have any shares in all that success that was there, but ended up having the chance to go and study sustainable business in the Netherlands through the program I was in. And I think that was really kind of where I started. Like that was the first seedling of getting me interested in the space. I think kind of leading up to it, I'd gotten to be around this fund that was really, really successful all of a sudden. And I think in my head had been excited about that. And that's kind of what I'd been, not that I was doing all that much work before I went off to college, but, working hard at school, everything else to, kind of eventually get there. And it still sort of felt like something was missing a tiny bit. Again, I didn't have the financial upside, but it felt like something was kind of personally just not quite in the picture yet. And so that was then where it was sort of this idea of, well, could I find a way to have a positive impact and also career success, or positive impact as well. If that makes sense, kind of marry those two together. And so that lined up with going and studying abroad in the Netherlands and taking a sustainable business class. And academically, one of the more challenging things, I worked pretty hard throughout school, but it was a different system over there. I think I remember studying 100 hours for a final and getting a 70-something% and trying to memorize a 500-page textbook. It wasn't my favorite boots on the ground experience, but the takeaway and really where the seed kind of got planted for Rye was when you think about sustainability in the EU in particular, it's a little different from us in the US and in North America more broadly speaking, where it really felt like companies were falling into three buckets when it came to sustainability. And their businesses, they're the ones that were doing the right thing and they were reporting on it and they were getting rewarded for it. They were the ones that were, working towards doing the right thing and being transparent. And everyone said, okay, we'll give them some time and let them get there. And then there were the ones that weren't really doing the right thing or covering things up, and they were getting hit with regulatory fines. Consumers were boycotting the brand. They weren't going and buying from them anymore. There were really, I think, strong kind of systematic forces in place that encourage businesses to do the right thing by the environment and other factors at the end of the day. What stood out to me when you look at the US, for better or worse, we are profit driven. At the end of the day, we all make decisions, myself included, by what's going to be good for our bottom line. And what I ended up getting really interested in was, again, that idea of how can you marry kind of positive bottom line impact with also positive impact on the environment and the people around us. And so that was kind of that initial little seed for Rye. Didn't know what that would look like just yet, but kind of finished up that program, ended up doing some backpacking around the UK for a bit, went over to Indonesia and worked with small businesses there as a consultant. And that really kind of started to get me interested in the small business side of the equation, and then came back to the US. And at the time I was running, I think we've all sort of seen them before, or they pop up in most schools, the little student consulting operation that comes out of the business school. Was running the one out of UW, and we would get to go, ironically, actually work with Microsoft and Costco and larger players, but we would also have these small businesses that we worked with. And we ended up having this 70-person software company from the Bay Area reach out. And at the time, they wanted to go carbon neutral, which isn't a term you see as much these days, but they wanted to go carbon neutral and essentially figure out what were their emissions, how could they balance that, and then how could they ethically report that and market it for the business benefits associated. And the problem that they ran into as a smaller business was that there wasn't really a good option out there for them. It was kind of either these, self-service softwares, which were affordable, which was good, but not great, because then you had to have someone on your team that actually understood all the ins and outs of greenhouse gas inventorying and, everything else that gets involved in the topic. And then the other side was more of your kind of traditional big box consulting operations, which were also good, but not necessarily great, because they were built for much larger organizations and had the price tag that you might expect to come with it. And so they literally reached this point where they reached out to, what was a student group to try and get help doing this. And I got lucky enough to just be coming back kind of at this time, to take them through that process, and then to spin it out right as COVID hit into a business that I ran on the side for about a year and a half while I finished up school. In a different life, I would have been a McKinsey and Company consultant coming out of school, but we got really fortunate to have some great early traction, some really great early investors, and basically we've been growing the company ever since. So that's kind of been the detailed and also a little bit high level path, but I've loved every day of it.
That's awesome. So I have a little bit of an echo. Let's back up a little bit. Can you explain what climate accounting is?
Yeah. So the niche, and I will say within sustainability, ESG, whatever, the terms that are being used, there are a lot of fields that go into it. I mean, that could be looking at your water use, that could be looking at your waste, that could be looking at your emissions, and emissions is where we factor in. So when we do kind of climate accounting or carbon accounting is usually the term we use most often. It's essentially looking at a company and their whole operations across the whole value chain. So all the way from kind of the goods and services and the suppliers that they work with, that they're buying from, through to, let's say they've got company facilities, see electricity going on in the facilities, all the way to their business travel, their employees working from home, their employees commuting, the use of their sold products in some cases. If you sell a washer, what's the implications from emissions perspective on the electricity that washer is going to use over its lifespan? So when we do carbon accounting, it's really working, in our case, with small and mid-sized businesses to really help them to understand what that footprint is across their whole company, and then what they can do about it to reduce it. And then also ideally doing that in a way where, if you sell the washer, you don't have to go survey all your customers and get super in the weeds. We also want to make it easy, but accurate at the end of the day too.
Why would a small or mid-size, I understand, so let's back up. I understand the kind of brand benefits that a larger company could have for this, particularly given some certain products for those target customers are looking for it. What benefits or why would a smaller, medium-sized business care about this?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think that's probably the number one. I think the two main questions we get are, one is, why should I care about this? Two, I'm all remote. Why should I care about this? Those are probably we'll get to that one. Yeah. So I think when it comes to why care about it, really the way that we see it is this is an interconnected system at the end of the day, right? These are all, whoever your customers are also your employees. They're also the same people who are going to be investors, going to be business partners. Like, that's the same population. It just means they're different groups of people, different individuals, right? And the stat that has always stood out to me is that 80% of consumers essentially want or expect businesses to be doing something about climate change, and 50% are actually willing to switch their buying to the more sustainable option if they're given that choice. And so again, when you think about that, that's consumers, but those are consumers also buying goods and services from small and mid-sized businesses. It's not just enterprises. They expect that everywhere they're looking. Those consumers are also your employees, and they bring those same beliefs into the workplace. There's some really interesting research out there right now with similar statistics that employees expect the companies that they work for, regardless of size, to care about our planet and to be doing something about it. Those are investors. If you want funding, they're going to expect that you're going to be responsible and use those funds in the right way and grow a company that's doing the right thing. Your business partners, it's everyone in that ecosystem is impacted. And so I think at a root level, that's kind of what we see really driving it. But what's interesting is you even see that then come through in B2B. So I think that's where we started working together, was through a request that you got for Microsoft. And so that's what you see at kind of an enterprise scale. It's all those same factors coming together. And in this case, for anyone listening, if you've ever seen, T-Mobile is going to be net zero by 2040 or whatever those terms or those commitments might be. When you actually do the math and do that carbon accounting, I'll try not to get too into the weeds because I can get a little overzealous sometimes. But essentially, like we were talking about earlier, when you look at a company's corporate carbon footprint, it's looking at everything across their value chain, right? It's, again, the suppliers, it's your direct operations, it's also, all these other factors. And it turns out when you do the math, 70 to 80% of the average enterprise's emissions are actually the emissions from their purchased goods and services with their suppliers. And so if they want a chance at hitting those commitments and those goals and some of the regulation that's out there are starting to come out around it, they need their suppliers to also start tracking those numbers, reporting them, and reducing them over time. And so that's where Unif and our work together, right? Small companies can, in the B2B space, be suppliers to very large companies, and you still matter as a part of their footprint. And so that's, I think, where we see a lot of drive behind this. But again, it's that sentiment that people care about this and they expect all companies to do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same concept that we're hearing a lot about now when it comes to the downstream impact of tariffs on more heavy manufacturing based industries like car manufacturing, right? You say I've heard stats about the car basically goes across from Windsor, Ontario to Michigan multiple times. They're not talking about the car, obviously, but they're talking about the piece parts that are used in the assembly of the car and the pieces that are in it. I think it's the same, especially for technology companies, right? Like technology companies rely on these enormous partner ecosystems. And it's not just Microsoft, right? It's Salesforce, it's SAP, it's Oracle. And so obviously, if they are meant to control what comes out of it, in the sense like we are these small and medium-sized businesses that are part of the partner network or their supplier network, we are each of us has a little bit of a piece of reducing the exposure in that. And I will say, like, for folks that don't know, just give a little bit of background, like Microsoft has set a really, really lofty goal of reducing their carbon footprint by, I think it's like 50%. I don't know that you
the supplier goal is 55% by 2030.
55%
so
by 2030.
Yeah.
And so every supplier, including little old me, has to certify our carbon footprint, which when this came to me, and let me just, now we'll spin this because you've given us a great perspective of what it's like and why this is important. Let's talk about the impact. Like, as a small business owner, it hits my desk and I think, I don't even know what ESG is, right? Because it's not what I do, right? I look at profitability. I look at business model transformation. I don't look at accounting at all, let alone, or environmental footprints at all. I look at, the business models and the monetization behind things. And so it took a fair amount of learning, and I went through exactly the process you talked through, which was, okay, can I do this myself? Well, there are platforms out there. The answer was very quickly, this is a 3-week project for me. I do not have time for that. Then, okay, let me see who does this. Google search, KPMG. Well, like, how much we don't meet a minimum that they would need. So it was, I think you are filling like a really important niche in this ecosystem to, allow companies like us to first, like, be able to meet these supplier requirements. Like, if I can't meet them, I can't sell to these companies anymore, right? So that was our perspective on it. Here's the question, though. So you're me, and not to put you on the spot here, but
I'm ready.
Okay, so I don't work remotely. I have an office, but my office is about 10 by 8 in a LEED certified building in downtown Austin. Most of my team does work remotely.
Yeah.
We really don't travel
Yeah.
much to client sites. I do have some members that some consultants that they don't work with Microsoft. They work with other clients in other parts of the country, and they do travel, but they live locally, right? We try and find people in the same city. So there is a bit of car traffic there. But like if you're me and you're thinking about this goal, what are the opportunities? Where are the levers that
Yeah.
we could even think about pulling
Yeah.
to be a part of this change?
Yeah. This and yep. Now coming into question number two here, and that's it's again, it's probably the one we hear second most is, we're already doing X and Y. What can we do to improve from there? And I think the first step is really recognizing what you're already doing that is having a positive impact and making sure that that stays consistent, right? I think that's one of the really interesting things we've seen is, you can say, oh, this is great. Like we're doing really good. And then something comes up and it never really got written down that was actually a good standard practice you're already doing. And it goes out the window and the emissions go right back up, which is even worse, right, than staying steady. So I think that first step actually is a really important one that can sometimes be overlooked is having that appreciation for what you're doing now. When it comes to your facility, for example, you're in a LEED certified building, which is a fantastic first step. The step from there, I can see, the lights on, right? There's power flowing through the office right now for us to get to do the podcast together. Then the step is, okay, well, look into it. Where's your energy coming from, right? The building might be LEED certified, but what about the energy that it's using? Is that renewable energy or is that energy coming from the grid? Is it some mix, right? And there's some really great options and programming that's out there these days where even for small businesses, you can get access to essentially purchase renewable energy credits or certificates to balance out kind of that remaining electricity that you're using in your space. So I think that's like immediately looking there, then it's also, okay, well, do you use natural gas for your heating? Do you have heating, right? If no, then that's great progress. But if you
I have
do,
the sun.
you've got the sun, so you've got the natural, which is great, right? And so then in some cases, it's just focusing on the electricity. In other cases, it's, well, how do we get more of what, the spaces we're in using electricity? And then how do we make sure that the electricity is renewable and clean? And so that's an immediate one. When you look at business travel, for example, I think a lot of things you talk through are those great first steps, but it's really figuring out, okay, when we have to travel, one, how do we limit it as much as possible, right? What can be a Zoom call versus what needs FaceTime, for your clients? Do they actually need you there in person, or is this something that could be remote, especially for your clients who care about sustainability? Can you go make that case that, hey, maybe we could do this virtually? And then, when you do have to do that essential business travel, I think this is one that's always popular. One half this is always popular, one half's not so popular. But if you have to get on a flight, direct flights are actually better from an emissions perspective than flights with layovers, because where the most intensity on that fuel use is coming is at that kind of takeoff and burning a lot of fuel to get to cruising altitude. So that's a good side. The side that not everyone's always a fan of is it is also by the numbers more sustainable to fly economy versus business class, which we've had some reactions to that one. Focus on the direct flights first and
It makes
foremost,
sense.
right?
Like if the model looks at the amount of space you take up in that
Exactly.
tube.
That's exactly right. And then it's also, when you look at it from a longer term perspective, because of course the argument against that is, well, the plane's still going to fly, right? But if you start to see trends of, okay, well, over the long run, everyone's actually flying economy and we're selling less in business class, then, the incentive to the airline or the airplane manufacturer, right, is to create more economy seating, which is more efficient per capita over the long run. But then when you do look at beyond the flight, then it's, okay, what are the accommodations you're staying in, right? I think there's some really interesting research, and this is from the EPA, numbers out there where, the tier of hotel you go up, it's also using more electricity. It's using more natural gas per night that you're in that. So of course, don't stay anywhere you don't feel safe or comfortable, but also, does it need to be the Ritz every single business trip for everyone? Maybe not. And that's also good for everyone's bottom line too. So it's really kind of those tweaks and changes that we look for. The interesting one, and it's funny timing on this, we actually just had our internal call as a team about our work from home emissions from our sustainability director right before this. Even working from home, right, for remote employees, there's that impact of, well, what's the electricity you're using for your home office setup? Are you also commuting into an office some days, right? There's obviously an impact there. But for that work from home side in particular, there's really kind of interesting phenomenon out there. It's got a weird name, but it's vampire power, and it's basically that 12% of your utility bill on average comes from you not actually using your electronics or your devices, but from leaving them plugged in. So if you leave the toaster plugged in, you're not even using the toaster, right? It's just an example. You're not using it. It still has to run electric current through it. Whereas if you unplug it, now that goes to zero. And so it's these really kind of interesting opportunities for folks when you get to kind of that granular level of data and impact, where being more sustainable at home and kind of reducing those work from home emissions is also good for everyone from saving on your utility bill perspective too. So it's kind of all these like little tweaks that are out there, and kind of at the end of the day, what you see is that it is possible, it is doable, but it's about kind of getting into the weeds and really understanding what's going to move the needle at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's good to know that for us, I'm thinking as you're going through this, like, where could we make adjustments?
Yeah.
My team in Vampire Power, that is a good one. I've heard that before, not
Yeah.
in this context, but as a dollar saver, because here,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm in Austin. Our electricity bill in the summer can be $1,000,
Oh, yeah.
right? So it's something that it's naturally, like, it's already kind of entered the chat about what you do.
Yeah.
The other thing here is, like, I feel like we have we have very little choice here. I mean, we live in the middle of
Yeah.
Texas. It is what
Yeah.
it is. But to be able to know that I can buy down those credits when we need to make the adjustments, that's great free advice from you, Cooper. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, my pleasure.
So that's great. You've really helped me understand this. I kind of want to take the rest of our conversation in a different direction, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You've grown a great firm, and I kind of want to understand the path of, and the fact I didn't know that you did this effectively right out of school. That's really unusual. What I'm interested is in what has been your path to growth, if you could kind of talk about that. So we have the framework, and then within that, what are the levers that you've pulled or your firm has pulled at each stage to kind of help you moving bigger and bigger and bigger?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's funny. I mean, I think the last year or two in particular has kind of been the crazy years where we went from, two or three people to five Xing that pretty quickly. And have continued to grow on top of that since. It's been a really interesting journey. And it's funny because this is something that we're always thinking about, but right now, especially, it's something that's top of mind of, how do we continue to do the work that we're doing and make sure that, as the political climate changes and everything else, that it isn't something that's political. I don't think it needs to be, but B, how do you do it in a way that, as times change and circumstances change, that it's always adding value at the end of the day for our partners and having a positive impact too. When we first started out, when it was quite literally a school project, right? Probably 6 years ago at this point, the idea in my mind of spinning it out and growing the business, and now we work with Microsoft and Salesforces, the Intuits, a lot of big companies in the world. Back then, the idea was, we want to be a partner for small businesses that care about this and feel like they can't really do it. And so I think there's always, this part of me that loves that side of, going out there and being able to knock on anyone's door and make the case for why this is going to be valuable and go make it happen. And, we have partners that we work with in that capacity. I think what really started to be a big growth lever for us, and it's all stuff that's on the website and everything else too. I won't get too into the exact specifics on some parts, but really what was a growth lever was once we had this realization, a lot of our small business partners were coming to us because their largest customers had set those goals and now needed them to report and learn exactly to your point. All of them found themselves in the same position that you were in, trying to get this figured out. And that ended up being a really big growth driver for us was, okay, how do we help companies that actually have a compliance and sort of a direct, right in their face revenue implication requirement on the table? And so that's been a really kind of interesting path that we've gone down of then, it's okay, how do we help suppliers to X, but then, okay, what's Y asking? How do we go help the suppliers to Y? And how do we make sure that we're really adding value for them at the end of the day? And I think one of the most important parts and, where we've seen a lot of success is making sure that we're not just a checkbox exercise, right? Like, I mean, even the two of us getting on a podcast, right? It's more than just throw money at some provider and then try not to ever think about them again, right? We really want to build relationships with our partners and help them to recognize that there's value beyond just checking this box that they kind of, let's be honest, maybe didn't want to check it first and had never thought about before. And so that's been a really interesting part of that success too, in addition to this kind of supporting suppliers angle and some of those partnerships that we've built there with larger companies. It's also working with our small business partners and really being a partner at the end of the day. It's about actually adding value, actually showing how this goes beyond just checking that box. It's like we were talking about earlier, it's good for employee engagement. It's good for the RFPs that you're getting from people who could be customers, and maybe your competitors are already using sustainability to win the extra 3 points in the process that gets them over the line, right? It's kind of connecting those dots and really being there to help every step of the way. And so while that kind of, supply chain side has been this really interesting motion, and I think will continue to be one for us, it's also being a good partner to our partners. And that has led to a lot where, if you trace the dots back, like almost everyone we work with is somehow connected to someone else we worked with before. And just kind of having that sort of referral base, but also just building that community and all of us understanding that, we work together on this, that's where the real impact happens, but it's also where the real growth opportunities happen too.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I have been almost like preachy recently about referral. I call it the referral engine.
Yeah.
But that these businesses grow from a network of, it starts with one evangelist, it becomes 5 evangelists, it becomes 20 evangelists, and that those people kick off all of the referrals that come back to you. And the more that you can get more deeply embedded in these like pools of interconnected people, what you're describing. I mean, you have getting engaged in, I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday. And she's in a different industry than you. It's more like executive search, but I'm like, you need to go get involved in the partner network, because those people are going to be like, those businesses are the ones that are going to create this engine for you. I think the other thing I'm taking away from you is yes, you started this and run this very mission driven. That's very clear, but that I'm hearing your mission goes deeper than just the primary mission around having great impact for the world or the planet, which is so lofty, but also bringing that down to a really human level and saying like, we're here for the value of the people that we work with as well. And I can say like the way we have grown, and we have not reached the 5x size you have, but the way we have grown has always been in doing great service for our clients and for our people, like 100% of the time.
It's the most important thing. I think that if there was one, and I've been thinking about that for whatever reason more and more lately, and it's like, if there was one thing we had to keep, I think that's what it is really being a partner, thinking about others before you think about yourself, right? We all still need to think about ourselves in these situations too, but I think just that, empathy and putting yourself in everyone else's shoes and being there, like, it only leads to good things for everyone at the end of the day.
Yeah. And the payoff, I think people think about this sort of transactionally, but the payoff never happens transactionally. There is a payoff. You're just not going to know it until, a month, a year, 2 years, 3 years later, when it will come back to you. So,
yeah. I think it's finding satisfaction in helping other people. It is just, like that. Always, everyone wins at the end of the day. And those are the situations I love, are the, double and triple wins where you can have them.
So I want to ask one final question, and you're a little bit different. Normally I ask, what would you tell people who are starting out in the XYZ area where you started in, like for the consultants we interviewed you? For you, I actually want you to think about someone who is 20 years your senior, okay? So this is the person who is going into that third career phase. All right. The second career phase is kind of where you are right now, which is
Yeah.
I've got it under control. I'm scaling in my career or in my business, but I'm in that scaling phase. This person is in the I have scaled.
Yeah.
And now what? Given that you're so mission driven, what piece of youthful advice could you offer them? I think it's good. Like they want to hear it from,
Yeah.
I love like talking to people like you because I'm like, what do they, God, like, I don't know if my brain worked that way when I was younger.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's, and I won't get too existential here, hopefully, but I mean, it's like something I've family with illness right now and everything, and it's a thing, it kind of makes you think a lot about like when you are, I don't know, I almost think about that like 20 years from now, what should I be doing today to make sure that I feel like I did, the right thing, or that when I have 20 years from now, hopefully, that there is something to look forward to. Right. And I think if I'm interpreting it in the right way, and please course correct me if I start going down the wrong path, but I think so much of it ties back to a lot of what we're talking about, which is just like finding, I think, and maybe, everyone's different, right? But I think for myself, it's almost from a selfish perspective, like the most rewarding thing is feeling like you got to help someone else out, right? And when I think about, someone who's, maybe 20 years down the line, they've already built the thing, they've had, maybe some transactional success, whatever it is that happens. Yeah, I think just like the best feeling is when you can feel like you've helped someone else out and contributed in a way that's positive for them in the long run. And I think for me, that's something I'm thinking about every day. It's like as we keep growing, like as we go from me getting to be on every single client call to now me hearing about the client calls once a week, how do I make sure that the way we operate as a business reinforces that too, where at our operating level now, as we start to scale up, that we bring that every day, and that the people I'm lucky enough to get to work with, have that mindset too. I think that's such a big thing. And again, I don't know if I'm taking it in quite, the direction you'd initially asked with, but I really, like, I think it really is about knowing why I get up every morning is such an important thing versus just getting up in the morning because my alarm went off or because I feel like I need to. And there are absolutely those days where I'm like, all right, I look at the calendar going, oh my God, okay, I just need to get through today. And maybe I'm not thinking about the, loftier self ambitions that I have today. I'm just getting through it. But I think in, kind of that big picture, through whatever the highs and lows might be, which like everyone's going to have, when there's something to tie it back to, if this still feels like it aligns to what Cooper 20 years from now would want, what Cooper 40 years from now would want, maybe 60 years, we'll see how long things go. Right. Like, I think that, has just been so helpful, and it's just made it fulfilling, and it's made it where, when things feel unreasonable or feel unfair, I can sort of try and put that to the side a little bit more than I think I would otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think they need to hear that. It's interesting. I think that when I have these conversations with them, it goes back to that. They know that, but there's something that has happened where they're almost fearful about being in pursuit of that. I don't
Interesting.
know. It's really
That's really
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, because like, and not, I was going to end it, but let's just keep riffing. Let's just, if I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way because I made the choice to redirect my life,
Yeah.
in my mid 30s. So
Yeah.
it was like I hadn't hit the point of complete disillusionment yet. And I think that when I have these conversations of the second to third chapter, many of them have already hit that point. They have course corrected already,
Yeah.
and they know that's why, but they don't know how to go in pursuit of it. It's really interesting. So it's cool to hear you say that, and I think it's great to bring them back to this moment because it's like, guys, you knew this back then, didn't you? And
Yeah.
yes. So
Yeah. It's hard to get off of it. I think yeah, it's interesting. I won't get too personal, but I mean, it's even something my partner and I talk about all the time of like, from my end, like I could have been in what is a really, not patting myself on the back, but like it's a hard job to get. It pays well and everything.
yeah,
Like it
I
has
had
all the
it.
accolades.
I can
Yeah,
tell
exactly.
you.
That's right. I was gonna say, I think I remember that you did
You
that
can
from one of
see
my
the
emails.
wrinkles and the grays
Yeah,
from it.
right. And it's like, there are times where maybe it, I think from the outside, it could feel like, oh, dude, regret doing that. Like it's not like we've had this amazing last 5 years. And, everything always looks like that, right? If we're all being honest with ourselves and everyone else. And I think that's been maybe one of the big realizations is I've never regretted it. Like maybe there've been moments where I get close, but I think that's like one of the
Mm,
things that, can maybe be really hard when you've already been kind of
yeah.
locked in and through that is that fear of, oh, I'm going to regret having left this. And I will say again, I maybe have a little bit of a different perspective because I never, I did my internships and saw some of the big box consulting world as a student and got pampered through it. But, like I've never regretted it. And I think that was the thing that I was so afraid of before I kind of made that decision was that I would regret it. And I think it's that fear of that you will regret that almost holds you back. And again, it doesn't always play out, the way we want it to. And you never know what's going to happen. But I've never regretted it. And I think that alone kind of just keeps everything going every day,
I have
whatever else
never,
happens.
I have never once regretted it.
Yeah.
Not
Isn't that
once.
interesting? Like you would think that it would it's never happened. Even in like the
Not
lowest moments, it
once.
never
Even in
happens.
the
Yeah.
lowest moments, I think, and
Yeah.
I think to myself now, I would never. But yeah, no, I would never. I never regretted it, and they won't either.
Yeah.
I will tell you. I will
That's
promise. Every other
exactly.
conversation I've
Yeah,
had with
exactly.
3 years down the road, they're like, I
Yeah.
can't imagine going back. So,
Yeah.
well, Cooper, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. I am so glad we finally got to meet virtually. I owe
Yeah.
you lunch or dinner next time that I'm in Seattle, which I am due a trip. But thank you for joining and sharing your experiences and your perspective on things. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I loved it. This is great.